This story is based off of true events. Eleanor Chandler was born in 1790. She is the fifth daughter to Edward and Elizabeth Chandler. When she was 15, she met a boy named Todicheene. The two of them hit it off. Coco was different than any boy she's ever met. Her parents didn't approve of him, so they ran away together. Eleanor was happy with him. She wouldn't want it any other way. Coco taught her how to hunt. The two of them were soon expecting. They went on to build a shelter for their growing family. Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby girl in 1806. They named her Murial. A few months later, their home was finally finished. They even managed to have their own livestock. Most of their days were spent farming. Coco often crafted furniture when he wasn't hunting. While Coco built the furniture, Eleanor would knit clothes and blankets. They had another little girl in 1808. Her name was Winona. Her and her sister were close. They had another baby in 1812, a little boy. They named him Nahile. With the kids growing, they were able to help around with the chores. Muriel loved taking care of the animals. Eleanor taught the girls how to knit as well. In 1821, they welcomed another little girl. Her name was Sequoia. They then had another boy in 1824. His name was Onacona. In this time, the girls had become young women. Eleanor developed a hobby for arranging flowers. The family was incredibly close. The family would spend nights telling each other stories. It had become a tradition of theirs. Nahile had become old enough for Coco to teach him how to hunt. He showed Nahile how to use a bow and arrow to prepare him. Whenever they hunted, Coco let Nahile roam on his own. One day he stumbled across something strange. Nahile was fascinated by a creature he had never seen before. The creature wasn't as nice as it first seemed. It attacked him. Coco had heard his son's cries and came as quick as he could. He carried a dying Nahile all the way home, but it was already too late. Nahile had passed away in 1824 at 12 years old. He was buried on their grounds. His death shook the entire family. Coco felt guilty for not being there when his son needed him most. He would do anything to get him back. After Nahile passed, nothing was the same. Coco and Eleanor had one more child in 1829, a little boy named Dacey. In 1830, a strange man came to their home and told them they had to leave. Coco refused and told the man he had no right, but the man threatened to harm them if they didn't do otherwise. They were given no choice but to leave everything they built behind. They traveled 4 miles in many conditions in search for a new place to call home. They would bathe whenever they came across a body of water. Coco tried to make things better by telling stories by the fire the way they used to. He helped keep the family's spirits up. They were on their feet for a while. Eventually, the exhaustion had caught up to them. Sequoia had become quite ill. She had become too sick to walk any further, so the family stayed put for a while. Coco took Muriel out to catch fish while the family got some rest. They later went to sleep. Early that morning, Eleanor noticed Sequoia wasn't breathing. She had passed away in her sleep at the age of 9. They buried her in an unmarked grave before continuing their journey. They traveled further for many more months. But Docker grew fussy as he caught a cold. Coco tried his best to keep him calm, but the family feared for his health. As Docker's condition grew worse, they stumbled upon a plot of land. They went straight to work to build shelter. They took turns watching the little ones. They worked in the worst of conditions, but by then they were used to it. With weeks of building, they eventually had a structure to live in. Within a year, it was finally finished. In that time, Doka had gotten better. They had a memorial for Nahele and Sequoia to always remember them. At the end of every day, the family gathers for storytelling the way they always used to. Murial Todicheene was born in 1806. She is Eleanor and Coco Todiceene's first child. It had been a few years since they settled into their new home. By then, the family was thriving in crops and livestock. They even had a couple of horses. Murial helped take care of the animals as she always did. She also tended to the garden and cooked when Eleanor wasn't available. Of course, her other siblings had the same chores. But Murial would wake up at the earliest to tend to the farm. She spent most of her time with the animals, specifically with her horse Freya. Murial often took her on rides around the area. It had soon become a part of her routine. Horse riding felt freeing for her. During this time, her younger sister Winona had found love. The young man had kindly asked for her parents' blessings. They were married that year. Winona had moved out shortly after, but stayed in the neighborhood. After Winona was married, Coco and Eleanor decided to talk to Murial about marriage. Murial had many other things to think about than that. She also didn't want to leave the home they built together after what they went through to get there. Despite feeling that way, she kept their wish in the back of her mind. By then she was 30 years old. She knew there wasn't many who'd be interested. So she kept living her life the way she had been, and accepted that she may never be married. That was when she met Onacona Chavos. They shared the same love for horse riding. They were married in 1837. Every day they would ride their horses together. Around the same time, her sister had a baby. The family was thrilled to have a new addition. Murial never thought about having children before then, but she had soon caught baby fever. In 1838, she was expecting her first child. It was exciting for everyone. They couldn't wait to have a little one around. As soon as she was in labor, everyone started to prepare. She had all the help she could possibly ask for. But her brother Onacona had suddenly gone missing. Coco went out to search for him while everyone else helped her. During the birth, Murial had nearly lost her life, but was able to have a healthy baby boy. While they were celebrating the birth of her son, Onacona came into the room frantic. He had explained that they were attacked, and Coco was seriously hurt. Everyone went out to help while Winona stayed with Murial. Despite her arguments to help, it was insisted that she get some rest. Her body had such a difficult time with the birth that she would not be able to have any more children. The birth was exhausting, so Murial went to sleep. When she woke up, her mother told her her father had passed away. Murial was still recovering from such traumatic birth that the news left her numb. Her husband was there for her during this time. Eleanor wasn't very well after Coco's death. Spending time with her grandson was the only thing that gave her joy. She took care of him while Murial rested. His name was Chaska. After months of rest, Murial was back on her feet. She was able to visit her father's grave for the first time. It broke her heart. Things were different after he passed. Murial made sure to keep the family together. She knew that's what her father would have wanted. She still made the time to take Freya for a ride. There wasn't a day she didn't. Winona Todicheene was born in 1808. She is the second child of Eleanor and Coco Todicheene. In 1836, she met a man named Paco Dacey. They were married that year, where Winona moved in with him and his family. She lived there with his mother, father, and younger sister. Winona settled quite well in her new home. In 1837, she discovered she was expecting. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Todicheene. Todicheene was the firstborn on both sides of the family, so everyone was excited to meet her. Winona brought her along for their nightly storytelling by the fire. At home, Paco's family helped with the baby as much as they could. They were a big help. That next year, Winona's older sister Murial was having a baby. Winona had come over to support her during the labor. When everyone left to investigate her father's incident, Winona agreed to stay with her sister. Her sister had a very difficult birth, and she didn't want her to feel any more stress. But she was extremely worried for her father. After Murial went to sleep, she waited for everyone's return. Murial's husband had come back and told her her father did not make it. Winona was devastated and blamed Onacona for him being out there in the first place. Onacona argued with her as if his excuse was reasonable at all. Eleanor stopped them before the argument could get any louder. Winona hated how calm she was. She told Winona to go home and get some rest. But Winona could not sleep that night, knowing her father was gone. Paco was there to comfort her in her grief. The death was really hard on her. After her father's passing, Winona stayed at home for a while. She would only visit her family on certain occasions. She loved her family and wanted her daughter to spend time with them. But Winona was still upset with her brother. She blamed him for her father's death. Still, she didn't let her feelings get in the way of spending time with everyone else. Later in 1840, Winona had another baby girl. Her name was Chilali. She introduced her to the family, while Taya and her cousin Chaska got to play together. They also had their first night of storytelling since Coco's passing. In 1842, Winona was pregnant once more. She had given birth to twins, Ohansi and Shilaya. With 4 small children running around, there was never a boring day. Winona was slowly starting to come around the family again. She missed spending time with them. She spoke to Ona for the first time in years and apologized for her behavior. Ona was relieved to hear that and forgave her. For the first time in years, everyone was able to enjoy each other's company without any tension. With all the love they share for one another, the family was whole once again. Onacona was born in 1824. He is Eleanor and Coco Todiceene's 5th child. Ona had always looked up to his father. He wanted to be a hunter just like him. But when he was finally old enough, Coco refused to teach him. He preferred the children stay at the farm, where it was safe. No matter how much Ona begged, the answer was always no. So Ona took it upon himself to learn on his own. Murial saw this and told him what happened to their brother Nahile. The story of his brother's death frightened him, so he promised not to disobey again. As he got older, that fear and obedience faded. He started teaching himself again to impress his father. He assumed that Coco would now allow him to hunt since he was older. However, his father still wouldn't allow it. Ona had become frustrated. He did everything that was asked of him, so why couldn't his father trust him? He started to rebel. He argued with his father every time they spoke. It came to a point where Coco had to have a talk with Eleanor about his behavior. She spoke with Ona, but he still didn't get it. He felt like no one trusted him. He knew the only way to gain their trust was to prove himself. So in 1838, he decided to go hunting on his own. He found some woods to hunt in. When he didn't come across anything, he moved on. He was losing daylight but refused to go home empty-handed. After hours of searching, he had finally come across something and prepared to kill. It was then that Coco found him. Coco was relieved to find his son alive, but furious that he ran off. He scolded him. Ona hollered back and blamed him for not taking him hunting. As they argued, something lurked nearby. A strange creature of the night. They heard his howls over their shouts. The strange creature confronted Ona. Coco told him to run while he stepped in. He confronted the beast and bought Ona time to get away. Ona heard the snarls and his father's screams as he ran for his life. When he finally made it home, he told everyone. Eleanor and Coco went with him back to find his father. But Coco was already gone by the time they got there. Eleanor was absolutely devastated to find him in that state. Coco helped carry him back home to be buried. When they finally got home, Ona's sister screamed and blamed him for everything. Eleanor was able to calm her down and send her home. Before she went to bed, she asked him what happened in those woods. It was hard for him to explain, but he knew it wasn't an ordinary animal. Ona would never be able to sleep peacefully without hearing his father's cries and roars of a beast. He felt guilty that his father died because of him. After Coco's burial, his guilt had become worse. It felt like he had torn the family apart. Everywhere he looked, he was reminded of the pain he caused. So he kept his distance from everyone. Over the next few years, he kept to his chores and remained at the farm. He would watch his mother visit his father's grave every day. As calm as she seemed on the outside, he worried for her. Sometimes he would catch her talking to herself. Everything and everyone reminded him of what he did. Ona felt it would be better if he left. In 1843, he moved into his own little home. There he lived with his horse Coco. Every now and then he'd go and visit his family. But most of his days were spent alone at home. It got lonely awfully quick. He still felt guilty about his father's death. In 1845, he met a woman named Delilah. They had fallen in love and were married that year. He introduced her to his family, where she was welcomed with open arms. Delilah was always there to comfort him whenever he broke down about his father. Despite all he told her, she never looked at him any different. In 1847, they had a child, a little girl named Pearl. They then had another child that next year, a little boy named Nokwizi. Now with a family of his own, Ona had the same concerns as his father. To assure history never repeats itself, he tells the children the story of how their grandfather saved him from the beast in the woods. Todicheene was born in 1829. He is Eleanor and Coco Todiceene's final child. Doce was only 9 years old when his father was killed. Since he was asleep during the events, he was the last one to hear about it. He was devastated. And like his older siblings, he didn't get to grow up with his father around. While Doce was lucky to have his mother and other parental figures, he still missed his father. As the years passed, Doce had gained his own independence. He helped around the house as much as he could. He and his nephew Chaska were close. Chaska was like a little brother. Doke helped him practice horse riding. They practiced every day. Their stories by the fire had become more popular with their growing family. They gathered for stories every week. For every gathering, his mother cooked something special for everyone to eat. His favorite treat was her jars of jam. It inspired him to make a drinkable version. Eleanor helped with the recipe. When it was finally done, she was the first to try. Everyone loved how smooth it tasted. So Doke made more with different fruits. Eleanor was always the first to try. She was his biggest fan. She told him to start selling the drinks, but he wanted to keep it within the family. In 1848, they experienced a harsh winter. Eleanor had gotten sick and could not recover. She died that year. After her funeral, Doke decided to fulfill her wishes and start selling his drinks. He didn't sell much at first, but people were soon lining up to get a bottle. As soon as he got home, he made more to sell the next day. Eventually, his sales had him coming home with heavy pockets. At family gatherings, he would serve his best. They also loved hearing how he got the idea to do it all. With his booming business, Doke had become quite popular in town. A young woman had caught his eye. Her name was Marisol. She was his first love. At just 19, Doke had everything he could ask for. He was able to provide for his family and still have money left over for himself. One day while he was out, a man named Roberto promised him that he could make his business even greater. Doke liked the idea of his business being more known and agreed. He happily signed the contract. All he had to do was make the drinks and Roberto would do the rest. Doke was able to do that, but he wasn't receiving any money for it. He was able to find the man in town and ask where his money was. Roberto laughed and told him that wasn't in the contract. He explained that his entire business now belonged to him. Since Doke signed the contract, he was obligated to work for him without pay. Doke couldn't believe what he was hearing. He went home in tears and told his sister about his mistake. Murial comforted him and assured him that everything would be okay. That Doke was more concerned about losing his business than the money. The whole reason he made it public was to honor his mother. Now it was gone. He stayed in his room for days, sulking in regret. During this time, Marisol had suddenly moved away with her family. She didn't even get to tell him goodbye. His siblings came over to make him feel better. They all assured him about his mistake. His brother Ona had also given him an idea. Doke decided to continue working for Roberto and made more drinks. No one knew his recipe, so it would be impossible to recreate it elsewhere. As usual, Doke gave Roberto the product to sell. But the people didn't seem interested in the drinks anymore. Everyone said it had a bad aftertaste. The man was so embarrassed to own such thing that he destroyed the contract. Everything was once again in Dacia's name. He decided it would be best to keep the drinks within the family. Perhaps in the future he'll sell it again. For now he was happy again. In 1855 he was married. The woman's name was Esmeralda. Doke loved her more than anything. They had 3 children together. A little girl they named Marisol, after his first love in 1857. Felipe, who was born in 1859. Then Javier. He was born in 1861. They stayed at his family's house with his sister and her family. There he lived happily for the rest of his days.